And while the political world fixates on polishing their campaign strategies, put on the back burner until the campaign dust settles is the work they were elected to do. And that's creating policies and passing legislation that address the pressing issues facing the U.S. today. The latest example, the Cybersecurity Act of 2012, had the full backing of the White House and appeared to have bipartisan support. It's referred to by lawmakers as critical to America's national security, and it appeared to have struck a balance between cybersecurity and protecting people's privacy. But that bill is now on hold after complaints by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and other corporate lobbying groups. But that's not all. Legislation on student loans, transportation, corporate tax reform. It doesn't look like anything will happen until the election is a done deal. So as long as campaigning remains top priority, what does this mean for the American people? To discuss this, Max Pappas, Vice President of the Public Policy and Government Affairs at FreedomWorks, joins us now. Welcome there. So, I mean, it seems politics is paralyzing policy, or at least during an election year, but shouldn't it be the opposite?
Well, we like to say that good policy is good politics. So I think what we're having here is a problem where some of the people in Congress don't like the current policy mix that would also be good politics. If you look around at who's winning, it tends to be the more limited government people. You've got Ted Cruz in Texas recently winning. You got Richard Murdoch in Indiana recently winning. They're showing that candidates who are running on bold platforms of serious cuts are winning. You got a lot of people in Congress who don't want to pass legislation that would be of the same sort of policy mix.
And talk about more, I mean, it seems like what has defined this Congress is just partisan bickering and just, I guess, a lack of getting anything accomplished. Is this something that you see changing anytime soon?
I actually don't think that that's what's happened. If you take a look at the breakdown of the legislation as it's come out of each chamber, the Republicans control the House and the Democrats control the Senate. The House, with the Republican control, has passed a long list of legislation and sent it over to the Senate. What's happened over in the Senate is that the Democrats are just saying no, and they're sitting on everything that the Republicans send over. They've sent bill after bill. They've sent budgets over. They've sent reform proposals over. And Harry Reid and the Democrats in the Senate just wind up sitting on them, spending more time saying that the Republicans are the party of no, which just doesn't jive with the actual volume of legislation that's come out of the two different chambers. Over in the Senate, one of the primary responsibilities for either House of Congress is to pass a budget. The House has passed budgets each of the last couple of years. The Democrats who control the Senate haven't passed a budget in over 1,000 days, failing their core responsibility.
And people are becoming frustrated. I mean, this Congress has one of the lowest approval ratings, I think, ever. But an interesting fact here, 151 laws have been enacted by the 112th Congress. But within that, a lot of this is just kind of like lightweight legislation, you know, like renaming courthouses and post offices. But a lot of the really important stuff they haven't touched upon. I mean, we had mentioned in the intro there, the cybersecurity bill. This appeared to have bipartisan support, the backing of the White House. That doesn't look like it's going anywhere. Other important high-profile legislation, such as, you know, 21st century national security, immigration, corporate tax reform, cyber legislation, all this stuff. I mean, does this kind of say something about their priorities?
Well, if you look at what each of the chambers has passed, you got something great called the REINS Act that came out of the House. What this would do is really put the reins on the regulation that comes out of the executive branch. This is something that's gotten carried away over the last couple of years and that doesn't really get a whole lot of attention. You've got regulation after regulation coming out, and you have it being passed by unelected bureaucrats in the executive branch. The REINS Act says, all right, executives, if you're going to pass major regulations, and regulations have a major impact on economic growth, and right now that's the biggest problem, is we don't have a whole lot of economic growth. They're saying if you pass anything that's a major regulation, which is, it has more than a $100 million impact on the economy, you need to come to Congress to get it approved. So it's the legislature reasserting its authority. This would be a real game changer in Washington. This is a major reform, and it went through the House. And again, the Senate just went and sat on it, just like it sat on the appropriations bills and the budget. and the health care reform bills that the House has passed and sent over to the Senate. So I think really the blame needs to be laid on the Democrats that control the Senate.
Okay, this is kind of the thing. We have the Republicans blaming the Democrats blaming the Republicans. But at the end of the day, why can't both sides, both houses, come together and, and work on these pieces of legislation? You're saying that, the economy right now should be the top priority, but, is it not, or what's happening?
Well, this is sort of a little bit of insight into how policy moves in Washington, D.C. You brought up cybersecurity multiple times. That's not going to have that big of an impact on the overall economy. You get these bills that are pushed heavily by corporate lobbyists. You saw over in the Senate, the predecessor to cybersecurity was the PIPA and the SIPA bills. And that was largely pushed by the former Senator Chris Dodd, who's lobbying for the movie industry. That shouldn't be the top priority right now when you've got so many millions of Americans unemployed. You've got major economic problems going on right now. And what they should be doing is passing things like the REINS Act to slow down regulation. They should be saying, all right, we're going to ease the punishment on capital and investment by putting in place permanently lower corporate taxes and other sorts of taxes that harm business development. But instead, you've got the left talking about raising taxes on small businesses. They hide it in the language of raising taxes on the rich. But most of the people that wind up paying taxes above $250,000 on the income tax scale are actually S-corp small businesses, not really wealthy individuals. Guys like Mitt Romney, they're not making money that's subject to the income tax. These guys are people who have well-established wealth. They can draw money that is largely subject to other types of taxes. So that's really a fallacy, this Warren Buffett argument idea. Buffett's not going to pay a higher tax rate if income tax rates are higher. They realize incomes through other means like capital gains and dividends. Well,
there are some members of Congress that are becoming frustrated and kind of speaking out against this gridlock that's been going on. Wanted to play this clip from Representative Charles Rangel.
I think, like the Nancy Pelosi said, we should be optimistic. We should try to get the American people to understand that we're paid to do a job and not to be locked in concrete. But close to 4 years ago, the Republicans made up their minds that they were going to destroy the president and not to support any of his programs. Now we're reaching the end of that. A lot of things are supposed to happen before we conclude our business, but you can bet your life the Republicans are not going to do anything this president would do in providing jobs and equity tax reform, and it's going to wait until after the election. They are just not going to do anything except to make America in worse shape than we are economically, and that is wrong.
And, well, you know what? He's not the only one, Max, that is frustrated. I want to play this other clip by Senator Bob Corker.
Big area that we're going to pursue as a country in the area of finance on the banking committee is going to be housing finance, I think. And obviously, not much is going to happen this year. Matter of fact, nothing will happen this year.
All right, so here we go. Nothing's going to happen this year. Americans are like, something needs to happen this year. Our country, economically, not doing so well. You have Representative Charles Rangel there saying, it seems like politics is becoming more important than, especially in this election season, than, the well-being or passing legislation that could help the economy. He's making this accusation that that Republicans are going to do everything in their power to just make it seem like President Obama is not accomplishing anything. What do you think about that?
I think that's a ridiculous political proposition that he's putting forward there. If you take a more recent history and you look at the 1990s, you had Republicans controlling Congress and a Democratic president in Bill Clinton. And what you found was the president being willing to work with the Republicans in the legislation they put forward. They passed welfare reform, which was a bipartisan initiative that the Democratic president signed, which you fast forward to now, you have President Obama gutting the welfare reform. So I think really what you have is just a president who's so far left of the mainstream of the fiscal conservatism that's really at the root of the center of American politics, that we might want to look at what the president's proposing and what he's doing. The health care proposal, the Dodd-Frank bills with regulation of the financial industries, what his EPA is doing to regulate every source of energy out there, to, as he said in his own words, necessarily make energy more expensive, to taking apart the bipartisan health care program. What you have in most of these instances is the opposition, where the Republicans have generally been on the opposite side of the president, has been bipartisan. Remember, the health care bill passed on partisan lines. Only Democrats supported it, whereas Republicans and Democrats opposed it. Same with the health care repeal bill that was put forward recently.
I think certainly says a lot of liberals or would say that he is not so far left and has actually come. I mean, a lot of the things and provisions that he wanted within the health care bill, he didn't quite go that far. So
still unable to
a
get
lot
any
of Democrats are
Republicans to
saying,
support.
well, he's actually not that far left, but there's that
I'm just
going
taking
on.
the roll call votes. Bipartisan opposition, partisan passage.
I mean, all up for debate.
Undebatable.
I do have, yeah, I think this is an interesting question that isn't very debatable, and you have to question members of Congress. They are taking a 5-week summer break, you know, despite the fact that the U.S. is in this nation of crisis. Is it time for a vacation right now, really?
I actually wish they would go away more often and for longer periods of time. You only know that your liberty is free in the United States when the Congress is not in session passing bills that generally take away our liberty. The history of how often they do things that are good while they're in Washington is not so great. And if you look back over time, I think the Founding Fathers were onto something when they set up Washington, D.C. as the capital. It's really hot. It's August right now in Washington, and it's terribly hot walking around in a suit. So they used to go away on vacation for a very long period of time back when government was much smaller. If you actually put a graph of the timing of the invention of air conditioning, which is where we might be able to lay all the blame for big government. So once you get the advent of air conditioning, Congress started staying around longer, presidents started staying around longer, and the size of government just went through the roof. So I'm blaming air conditioning.
I guess it all comes down to air conditioning. Who wants to work in hot and muggy conditions? It all makes sense. All makes sense. Max, we are out of time. I appreciate you coming to the studio. That was Max Pappas. He is the Vice President of Public Policy and Government Affairs at FreedomWorks.